that we have started worshipping screens instead of scripture, that we have started worshipping ourselves instead of having kind of reverence for higher power. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, men, depending on wherever you are in the world. I would like to invite you into a very intellectual discussion, depending on whenever you are in the world, as there seems to be a great absence of it in the modern dialogue. So let me first give you this idea, okay? If you dissolve a man of his spirituality, he will serve nothing greater than his sexuality. Pause there. Watch what thoughts arise in you as a consequence of maybe your social programming, maybe how you were raised by your mother and father, the whole nature and nurture argument there. But what essentially I'm trying to, the problem we're trying to solve in this video is, can you be moral without an absence of religious influence on your life, let's say? Now, the atheists among you will immediately shun that particular notion by saying, of course not, I wasn't raised in a religious family. My mother and father are perfectly moral people. I've learned good values from them, XYZ. Excellent. The problem I have with that argument, if that is something that you perpetuate, if you were raised in the West, your mother and father, your grandfather and grandmother, your great-grandmother and your great-grandfather, and it goes on and on and on, were raised on Christian Judeo teachings. Whether you would like to agree with me or not, the lineage of your family, the root cause of their value system, is Judeo-Christian. There is no getting away from that. So the fundamental axioms of your behavior have strong religious roots. Now, I'm going to take a leaf out of Jordan Peterson's book here and say that I think it's very naive for someone who maybe isn't religious or doesn't believe in any kind of higher power to believe that you can be moral just as a consequence of your own nature. Okay? I believe that truly good people, truly moral people, only come to that conclusion as a result of deep inner work, deep shadow work, as Jung would call it. And they come to the understanding that they are only moral, that they're only good, once they have realized their overwhelming potential to be evil. Evil is a subjective term, but let's say, I suppose evil is the best way to put it, but immoral, okay? Now, for the religious among you, I will add a little caveat here that I was a proponent of the first response, that you could be perfectly moral without religious influence. How naive of me to perpetuate that. And it is only through the exploration of other religious texts, especially Eastern texts, as maybe many of my subscribers here will know, I'm a great fan of Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism especially. But once I have allowed myself to become fluent with some of the scriptures in the East, the Vedas, for example, have texts like the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of my favorite pieces of religious scripture. It is only through reading that particular scripture, integrating the practical aspects of my life. That's why I love the Eastern so much, is it's so practical. Things like fasting, meditation, sexual continence. These things have been of invaluable resource to me going forward. And it is only through the practical aspects of that and the collective narrative of scripture do we start to find metaphorical truths. I'm leaning here on some of Jordan Peterson's work. I'm a big fan. Metaphorical truths in the form that, say you read a story. The greatest stories always have elements of metaphorical truth in them, even if they're fictional, like a dragon, for example. There's this old, I believe it was, no, it's not Robert Moore, Joseph Campbell idea of the hero's journey, slaying the dragon. we know dragons don't exist, but it's a metaphorical truth that the dragon can be a symbol of a particular challenge that you have in your life. It might be your depression, it might be the problems you're having with your father, the relationship that you have with your mother, let's say, and that is your particular dragon. And it is through the analysis and close observation of texts like the Bhagavad Gita, which denote the particular trials and tribulations of Arjuna when he was facing his particular his cousins on the battlefield, and he was in apathy about what is the right passage to navigate through his particular challenge here. We find truths in these stories, and perhaps these fictional stories. I don't know if the let's say the passages of the Bhagavad Gita are historically accurate, let's say, but they contain those metaphorical truths about things like Dharma, your duty to be able to do what you need to do, irrespective of what you feel is emotionally right. Being emotionally compromised as Arjuna was to face his own blood lineage on the battlefield. Now, coming back to our initial premise that if you dilute a man of his spirituality, you will serve nothing greater than his sexuality. Went off a tangent there, but it's important to acknowledge the roots in which we're trying to articulate this particular argument. I'm very much of the opinion that if we don't have a strong bedrock of metaphorical truth in stories, like the Bhagavad Gita, but maybe the Holy Bible, maybe the other religious texts, that we start to become a self-serving society. We start to become self-serving towards our own particular biological proclivities to eat, to fuck, for example. And I believe it's a very dangerous way of interacting with the physical realm. Now, I believe this is, what drives me to make this video in the first place, and even this channel, is my own observation of how the West is moving in this vein. That we have started worshipping screens instead of scripture. That we have started worshipping ourselves instead of having kind of reverence for higher power. If we kill God, as Nietzsche proclaimed in his complete mourning and apathy, if we kill God, we become God. If we cut down the king from his throne, we replace him with ourselves. And unfortunately, we can't be God. We are incarnations of God. We have his divine creative powers, but we are not the holistic embodiment of such a deity. Okay? We are fragmented, cut off from our own divinity. And that means that we're fallible, as we have, as Genesis quite poetically put, we have original sin. We're fallible. So we can't, it's naive of us to believe that we can't come to a place of any kind of authority, any kind of absolute authority. Therefore, we must put ourselves in servitude for something greater, like scripture, like collective story. You know what all religion is, really? I really hate this argument against how it has no value, how it has no universal truth. Religion is the collective human experience, illustrated and collected over millennia. Think about that, the collective human experience. Religion is the biography of the human race. So to make the claim that there is no value there, that there is no overarching moral principles that we can start to extract value from, integrate into our lives and begin to lead a life of more divinity, of more sanctity, is completely illogical. I think the problem comes when the atheists, the rational thinkers, begin to take the stories too literally, and that's when you lose it. So my friends, this has been an interesting discussion, different discussion, an intellectual discussion, as I mentioned, as I prefaced, in fact, that this is something that is highly absent from the YouTube scene, I think, at the moment, and it gives me great privilege to share such a conversation with yourselves. But I'd love to know what you think about the idea of this missing element of religion in people's lives, and how it can lead us down a vein where we become self-serving, self-seeking of pleasure, and we begin to push against the collective value of other people. Okay, we start to become selfish instead of selfless, and those stories can be found in those texts, irrespective of your ideological proclivity. I don't care if you're Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Buddhist or Taoist or Jainism. It doesn't matter. It is the collective human experience, and we should not be so careless to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, because these texts, they will always be valid. So my friends, if you enjoyed this discussion, a little bit different today, if you subscribe to anything of which I've said here, I'd love to know what you think, but you can subscribe to my channel for more high value, intellectual and deep discussions that I think is missing from our social narrative. Take care, my friends.